Be me Randy, late 40s. Been in sales pretty much my whole adult life. I'm not one of those slick, shiny suit types you see in movies. More like a football coach. I know my product, I know my people, and I know how to win. For the last decade, I've been the head of sales for a mid-sized tech components company. We're not a flashy startup, just a solid business that makes essential parts for bigger companies. My job was simple: lead the sales team and bring in the money. And we were damn good at it. My department was the engine of the whole company. We consistently beat our targets, quarter after quarter, year after year. The old CEO, a guy who came up through the ranks himself, understood us. He'd come down to our floor, see the numbers on the board, and just nod. He knew not to mess with a winning formula. Our floor was different from the rest of the office. The other departments were quiet, cubicle farms under fluorescent lights. You could hear someone staple a document from 50 feet away. Our space was an open-plan room with a constant buzz of energy. Phones ringing, people talking, friendly trash talk flying between desks. In the middle of the room, we had this big old brass gong. When someone closed a deal over a certain amount, they got to walk up and give it a good whack. The sound would echo through the floor, and everyone would stop what they were doing and clap for a few seconds. It was a tradition. A bit cheesy, maybe, but it worked. It was a tangible sign of success. We also had a massive whiteboard that took up a whole wall, showing the leaderboard. Everyone's name was up there, with their sales figures for the month updated in real time. It fueled the competition. The younger guys lived to see their name climb that board. It wasn't about shaming the people at the bottom. It was about celebrating the people at the top and giving everyone a goal to shoot for. Every Friday, we'd have a team lunch, my treat. We'd go to a local steakhouse or a good pub, talk about the week's wins, and just unwind. This was our culture. We worked hard, we competed hard, and we celebrated our victories together. My team was a loyal bunch, a mix of ages, but mostly guys in their 20s and 30s. I trained most of them from the ground up. I taught them that sales isn't about tricking people. It's about building relationships and solving problems for your clients. They respected me because I was in the trenches with them. I still took my own accounts, still made my own calls. I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. We were a brotherhood in a way. It was us against the world, and we were winning. Then, the old CEO announced his retirement. We threw him a big party. He came down to our floor, shook everyone's hand, and told me personally to keep the engine running. The board of directors, in their infinite wisdom, decided they needed to modernize and bring in some fresh leadership. That's when we first heard the name, Melina. The company-wide email said she was coming from some trendy software company on the coast. Her picture showed a woman in her early 30s with a sharp haircut and an expression that looked like she was perpetually disappointed in you. Her bio was a masterclass in corporate buzzwords: synergizing cross-functional teams, disrupting legacy paradigms, fostering a culture of inclusive innovation. My guys and I read it and had a good laugh. We figured she'd stay in her corner office, play with spreadsheets, and leave us alone as long as we kept bringing in the cash. We were wrong. Her first all-hands meeting set the tone. She stood on the stage in a pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. She talked for 30 minutes without saying anything concrete. The whole speech was about feelings, not facts, about our collective journey and creating psychological safety. I watched my team out of the corner of my eye. The initial amusement on their faces slowly turned to confusion, then to a kind of dull dread. The worst part was when she started talking about the company's culture. She said she'd spent her first week doing a cultural audit. She mentioned that some areas of the company felt less welcoming than others, that some traditions were exclusionary and rooted in outdated, aggressive frameworks. While she said it, her eyes swept over the room and seemed to linger on my team. We were the only group sitting together, the only ones not looking down at our phones. After the meeting, my top guy, a sharp kid I'd been mentoring for years, came up to me. He asked if we should be worried. I told him not to be. I told him our numbers speak for themselves. In business, results are the only thing that matters. I actually believed that back then. The changes started about a week later. They were small at first. The first thing to go was the gong. We didn't even get a direct memo, just a company-wide email from HR about workplace noise policies. The email went on about creating a serene and predictable auditory environment to accommodate diverse sensory needs. Buried in the third paragraph was a new rule. The use of gongs, bells, or other celebratory noisemakers is now prohibited. The next morning, a guy from maintenance came and took the gong away. He looked embarrassed about it. The floor was silent that day. We closed 3 big deals, and all each guy got was a quiet pat on the back. The energy was just gone. A couple of weeks after that, the leaderboard vanished. I came in one morning, and the big whiteboard was just white, erased completely. I went straight to the HR manager's office. He was a timid guy who always looked like he was about to apologize for something. He wouldn't meet my eye. He just mumbled that the decision came from the top. He said that public performance metrics were now considered a tool of pressure, not encouragement. He told me Melina believed it created a zero-sum competitive environment instead of a collaborative, team-oriented one. I asked him how we were supposed to track performance and motivate the team. He slid a pamphlet across the desk. It was for some new software that tracked engagement metrics and wellness scores. It looked like something designed to monitor prisoners, not salespeople. I walked out of his office without taking it. The biggest joke was the mandatory weekly sharing circles. Every Wednesday morning, we had to stop work for an hour and sit in a conference room. A consultant, hired by Melina, would lead the session. We were supposed to go around the circle and share one personal success and one personal challenge from the past week. My guys hated it. It was forced, awkward, and a complete waste of time. We developed a system. Our successes were always helped a colleague with a call, and our challenges were always finding a better work-life balance. We gave the most generic, boring answers possible just to get through it. The consultant would praise our vulnerability. It was a farce. During this whole time, Melina never spoke to me directly about these changes. She would walk through our department sometimes, never smiling, just observing. She'd watch the guys on the phone, her lips pressed into a thin line. It felt like we were animals in a zoo, and she was a researcher studying our strange, primitive behavior. One afternoon, she finally called me into her office. Her office was minimalist and cold, all white walls and glass. There was a single orchid on her desk that looked like it was made of plastic. She didn't offer me a seat at first. She stood by the window, looking out over the city. She started by saying that our department's numbers were impressive, in a vacuum. Then she started asking questions. Why was my team predominantly male? It wasn't. We had 2 women who were excellent, but the majority were men, which had never been an issue before. Why was the communication style so direct? She used the phrase toxic masculinity 3 times in 5 minutes. She said she was concerned about the culture of verbal jousting and the performative dominance she had observed. I tried to explain. I told her that what she saw as aggression was just passion, that sales is a competitive field and our energy is what drives our success. I told her my team is a meritocracy. I don't care who you are, where you're from, or what you look like. If you can sell, you have a place here. The numbers on the board don't lie, except the board was gone now. She gave me this pitying little smile. She said she appreciated my traditional perspective, but that the future of business is empathetic, not aggressive. She suggested I enroll in a leadership sensitivity training seminar. She had the HR manager send me the link before I even got back to my desk. The final straw started quietly. A couple of new people were hired for my team. Normally, I had final say on all new hires. This time, they were just assigned to me by HR. They were Melina's people. They had perfect resumes filled with all the right buzzwords, but they couldn't sell water in a desert. They spent more time documenting problematic conversations in the office than they did making calls. One of them, a guy who looked like he ironed his socks, filed a formal complaint because one of my top salesmen used the phrase, "Let's go kill it this quarter," in a team huddle. The complaint cited violent and aggressive language creating an unsafe workspace. My salesman had to have a 2-hour meeting with HR over it. The morale on the team, which had been sinking for months, hit rock bottom. The best guys were still performing, but out of habit and personal pride, not because they enjoyed their jobs anymore. The buzz was gone. The floor was quiet. It was just another cubicle farm now. I knew something was coming. I could feel it building. The quarterly company-wide meeting was scheduled. It was always a big event. Usually, I would get up on stage, present our incredible numbers, and the whole company would applaud the team that paid their salaries. This time, I had a bad feeling. The day of the meeting, I put on my best suit. I felt like a man walking to his own execution. The auditorium was packed. Melina walked on stage to polite applause. She started with her usual corporate speak, but there was a different edge to her voice, a kind of righteous fire. She put up a slide with the company's overall revenue. It was a record quarter. A huge chunk of that was, as always, from my department. But she didn't praise us. She said, "While these numbers are encouraging on the surface, they hide a deeper truth." The next slide was just a block of text. It was a collection of anonymous quotes. I feel like I can't be my authentic self at work. The pressure to conform to a specific macho personality is overwhelming. Jokes and comments often create an environment that feels hostile to women and minorities. Success is celebrated through aggressive rituals that make many of us uncomfortable. It was obvious where these came from, her new hires and probably a few others who saw which way the wind was blowing. Melina let the slide hang there in silence for a full minute. Then she looked out into the crowd, right at me. For months, we have been working to build a more inclusive and respectful culture, a culture where everyone feels valued, but cultural change is hard. Sometimes it requires us to remove the barriers that stand in its way. My stomach turned to ice. She then looked at me directly and spoke into the microphone. "Randy, you've been with this company a long time. Your team has consistently delivered strong numbers, but we have received numerous, deeply concerning reports about the culture within the sales department, a culture of exclusion, a culture that runs contrary to the values we are trying to build." The entire room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. What do you have to say to the employees who feel unsafe and unwelcome in your department? She was putting me on trial in front of the entire company. I stood up. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. I walked to the aisle microphone. I looked at her, then at the crowd. I saw the faces of my team. They looked horrified. "Melina," I said, my voice clear and even. "The only thing my team is guilty of is excellence. We are not exclusive. We are effective. The culture you're criticizing is a culture of winning. It's a culture of mutual respect built on performance, not platitudes. The numbers on your slide, the record revenues that this company is enjoying, were generated by that culture." I continued, "You can talk about feelings all day long, but this business runs on results. My team delivers those results, and I am incredibly proud of every single one of them." A few people in the audience started to clap, but it died down quickly under Melina's glare. She waited for me to finish, a cold, unreadable expression on her face. When I was done, she gave a slight nod, as if I had just confirmed everything she suspected. "Thank you for sharing your perspective, Randy. she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It has become clear that your leadership style is fundamentally incompatible with the future direction of this company. Therefore, as part of our ongoing restructuring to build a more collaborative and inclusive organization, your position has been made redundant, effective immediately." A collective gasp went through the room. "We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Security will now escort you from the premises to collect your personal belongings." Two large security guards, guys I'd never seen before, appeared at the end of my aisle. It was the most calculated, brutal public humiliation I could ever imagine. They didn't even let me go back to my desk alone. They walked me through the entire office, past every single employee. Nobody would look me in the eye. They just stared at their keyboards, pretending to work. I saw my team. They were standing by their desks, just watching, their faces a mixture of shock and rage. One of the younger guys, a kid I'd personally coached through his first big deal, looked like he was about to cry. I gave them a small final nod. The guards took me to my desk. They handed me a cardboard box and watched as I packed up my photos, my coffee mug, and the sales award I'd won 5 years in a row. They walked me to the elevator, down to the lobby, and right out the front door. The glass doors slid shut behind me. I stood on the sidewalk in my suit, holding a cardboard box in the middle of a workday. I had just been fired from the job I had dedicated the last 10 years of my life to. Not for failing, but for succeeding too well in a way the new boss didn't like. I looked up at the tall glass building. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt a strange sense of calm. I knew, with absolute certainty, that they had just made the biggest mistake in the company's history, and I knew I wouldn't be the one to pay for it. I stood there on that concrete for what felt like a long time. The city noise, the traffic, the people walking by, it was all muffled, like I was underwater. My entire professional world had been vaporized in about 90 seconds. Finally, I just started walking. I didn't have a destination. I just walked until my feet felt tired. I ended up at a small pub a few blocks from the office. It was the place I used to take the team to after a record-breaking month. The owner knew me by name. I sat at the bar, put the box on the stool next to me, and ordered a beer. As I sat there, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. And it didn't stop. I pulled it out. The screen was a waterfall of notifications, text messages, LinkedIn messages, missed calls. They were all from my team. That was insane. I'm so sorry, Randy. I've never seen anything like that. She's a tyrant. Just wanted you to know, we all have your back. This is BS. One message was from the top salesman I'd mentioned, the one who almost got an HR violation for saying, "Kill it." His text just said, "I quit. Just walked out. I'm not working for that woman." I stared at his message. The kid had a young family, a mortgage, and he just walked away from his job out of principle. An hour later, sitting at that same bar, 2 more of my best guys sent similar messages. They were out. The 3 of them together accounted for nearly 40% of the department's total sales. I didn't ask them to do it. I never would have. They did it because they were loyal. That's what Melina didn't understand. She saw a bunch of guys in suits. She didn't see the bonds we had built. I spent the next couple of weeks in a strange limbo. I updated my resume, started looking at job postings. It was humbling, but I was also getting a constant stream of intel from the guys who were still at the old company. It was like listening to a slow-motion car crash. Melina's first move after I was gone was to hire a new head of sales. She didn't promote from within, of course. She brought in someone from the outside. One of my guys looked him up. His entire resume was in HR and corporate culture consulting. He had 0.0 experience managing a real sales team. His name was apparently irrelevant because everyone just started calling him the therapist. His first official act was to hold a multi-day healing and rebuilding workshop. Attendance was mandatory. They spent hours doing trust falls and making vision boards for the department. He introduced something called Feelings Fridays, where the first hour of the day was dedicated to journaling about their emotional state at work. The competitive commission structure was completely overhauled. It was replaced with a team-based bonus system that was so convoluted, nobody could figure out how it worked. The idea was to eliminate internal competition. What it actually eliminated was the motivation to work hard. Why kill yourself to close a huge deal if your bonus was tied to the performance of the new hires who spent all day on their phones? The remaining top performers, the ones who hadn't quit on day one, started leaving one by one. Every time one of them resigned, I'd get a call. They'd tell me the latest insane story and then ask if I knew of any openings. Meanwhile, I was starting to get calls from recruiters. Word gets around fast in our industry. The story of my public firing was apparently becoming a legend. Most of the offers were decent, but one stood out. It was from our biggest competitor, the company we fought with tooth and nail for every major contract. Their CEO called me personally. He was an old-school guy, direct and to the point. He said he'd been trying to poach my top people for years and never could. He wanted to know my secret. He told me what happened at my old company was a disgrace to the profession. He said, "I don't care about your leadership style. I care about your leadership results." He offered me a position as vice president of sales for the entire North American division, more responsibility, a bigger team, a significant pay raise, and, he said, complete autonomy to run my division as I saw fit. I took the job. My first day at the new company was like stepping into a parallel universe. They were successful, but their sales floor was quiet, a bit like my old company had become after Melina took over. The energy wasn't there. They were a collection of individuals, not a team. I held a meeting with my new sales staff on my very first morning. I laid it all out. I told them we were going to work hard, we were going to compete, and we were going to win. I told them that from now on, excellence would be transparent and it would be celebrated. My first purchase order for the company wasn't for software or office supplies. It was for a 5-foot-tall brass gong. The facilities guys looked at me like I had 3 heads when I told them to install it in the middle of the sales floor. The next thing I did was install a massive digital leaderboard on the main wall. Some of the older salespeople grumbled. They weren't used to it. They said it was pressure. I told them, pressure makes diamonds. Then I started making calls. I called every single one of my old top performers who had left the other company. Within a month, I had hired back my 5 best guys. My old core team was reunited under a new banner. The effect was electric. My new team saw how these guys operated, the pace they set, the passion they had. The first time one of them closed a big deal and rang that gong, the whole floor stopped. Then they saw the instant recognition, the celebration. The guy's name shot to the top of the leaderboard. A week later, one of the company's original salespeople, a woman who'd been there for years, closed the biggest deal of her career. She walked up to the gong hesitantly, almost shyly. I gave her a nod. "Go on, you earned it." She gave it a huge swing, and the look of pure pride on her face was incredible. The entire floor erupted in genuine applause. That was the turning point. They got it. The culture started to build brick by brick. While we were building a powerhouse, my old company was crumbling. My contact, who was still there, kept me updated. The numbers were catastrophic. He told me the sales floor was a ghost town. The few remaining experienced people just kept their heads down and did the bare minimum, collecting a paycheck while they looked for other jobs. Melina's new hires were useless. They couldn't close. They spent their days in HR-mandated workshops on topics like deconstructing privilege in client interactions. The company missed its quarterly sales target for the first time in over a decade. They didn't just miss it, they missed it by a mile. Sales were down almost 50% from the previous quarter. According to my source, the board of directors was furious. Melina held a company-wide meeting to address the poor results. She didn't take any responsibility. Instead, she blamed the lingering effects of the old toxic culture. She claimed that the downturn was a necessary period of adjustment on the path to a healthier, more sustainable business model. She actually said, "We are prioritizing people over profits," as if the two were mutually exclusive. The employees, who hadn't seen a decent bonus check in months, were practically rolling their eyes. The real fun began when our fiscal years started to overlap. My new company and my old one competed for the same pool of clients. For years, it had been a fair fight. Now, it was a massacre. One by one, we started targeting their biggest accounts. These were clients I had spent years building relationships with. I'd get on the phone, and it was like talking to an old friend. They'd all say the same thing, that ever since I left, the service had gone down the drain. Their new reps were unresponsive. They didn't understand the product. They seemed more interested in asking about the company's diversity policies than in solving their technical problems. I didn't even have to badmouth my old company. I just had to listen. Then I would tell them about my new team, about the culture we were building, and the results we were getting. We flipped our first major client about 6 months after I started. A multi-million-dollar annual contract. Then another, and another. It was like a domino rally. We were taking their cornerstone accounts, the ones that had kept the lights on for years. My team was on fire. The gong was ringing half a dozen times a day. The leaderboard was a battlefield. We were crushing every sales target they put in front of us. The news of our success and my old company's failure was the talk of the industry. I got a call from my mole. He sounded grim. He told me there had been an emergency board meeting. The quarterly numbers were in, and they were even worse than the last. Sales had plummeted over 70% from their peak when I was there. The company was now actively losing money for the first time in its history. The board had given Melina an ultimatum. They told her she had one more quarter to turn things around, not with workshops or vision boards, with actual, real, black and white revenue. If she couldn't do it, she was out. He said the panic in the executive suite was palpable. Melina had apparently spent the last few weeks in a desperate frenzy, trying everything. She implemented a new, hyper-aggressive commission structure, which just alienated the few remaining team members. She fired the therapist and tried to bring in a hardcore, old-school sales manager, but he quit after 2 weeks, saying the department was unsalvageable. Nothing worked. The engine was broken. The spark was gone. I felt a certain grim satisfaction hearing all this, but mostly I was just busy. My new division was breaking every record in my new company's history. I was focused on the future. Then, one evening, I was working late in my office, reviewing the numbers for the month. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered it on the last ring. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, then a hesitant voice. "Randy, it's Melina." I leaned back in my chair. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She started talking, a flood of words. She said she'd been doing a lot of reflecting lately. She talked about how complex leadership is, and how sometimes bold decisions can have unforeseen consequences. She never once said the words, "I was wrong," or "I made a mistake." It was all wrapped in this sterile corporate language. She got to the point. She said the company was going through a challenging transitional period, and that they were looking to re-energize their sales division with proven leadership. Then came the offer. She offered me my old job back. Not just that. She offered me a new title, Executive Vice President, a seat on the senior leadership team. She offered me double my old salary, a massive signing bonus. She told me I could have complete control. You can bring the gong back. You can have your leaderboard. Whatever you want, she said, her voice sounding strained. We just need your results. I let her finish her whole pitch. I listened to the desperation creeping into her voice as she piled on more and more incentives. When she was finally done, the line was silent for a few seconds. I took a deep breath. Melina, I said, my voice perfectly calm and steady. You seem to be under a misapprehension. You think you fired a person. You didn't. I paused. You fired a culture. You dismantled an engine that was running perfectly because you didn't like the noise it made. You took a team of winners and you broke them. Loyalty, morale, momentum, those aren't things you can just buy back with a bigger salary when you get scared. You don't get to burn down a house and then complain that you're cold. I could hear her trying to interject, but I kept talking. I'm looking out my office window right now, Melina. I'm looking at my new sales floor. It's late, but half my team is still here. Not because they have to be, but because they want to be. They're competing. They're laughing. They're winning. We're building something here. Something you'll never understand. You say you need my results, I continued. My results are a product of my people, and my people are here with me. The best ones from my old team, they're right here. You can't have them back. I stood up and walked over to my office door. I could hear the buzz of the floor, the sound of a few guys celebrating a late-day sale. I appreciate the offer, I said, and I almost laughed. But I'm exactly where I belong. I'm at a company that values merit over metrics and results over rhetoric. Her voice was just a whisper now. Randy, please, the board. I cut her off. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Now, if you'll excuse me, my team just broke the all-time monthly sales record, and I'm about to go buy them a round of drinks. Goodbye, Melina. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I stood there for a moment, the phone still in my hand. Then I walked out onto the sales floor. One of my guys, one of the originals from the old company, saw the look on my face. He asked me if everything was all right. I just smiled. Everything, I said, is perfect.